wondered if
Sorry.
Thank you. So I just wondered if everyone could mute during it, except obviously our speaker. So I think, Sue, you're not muted at the moment, but I just wondered if you could. Thank you. It just helps with the feedback, obviously, and particularly when it's getting recorded. So thank you, everyone. Friday night, 8 o'clock, that you're all here, and particularly our guest speaker, who I'm sure many of you already know, who's probably had a long week in the NHS. So we really appreciate you giving up your Friday evening for this. I know that I've met some of you before, but just to introduce myself, I'm Catherine Behel. I'm mum to Anya, and I'm on the AHC committee along with a few others that are you can see on the screen here tonight. And I'm the research liaison committee rep, and part of our thinking around this was actually having an avenue to speak directly to a researcher and find out some more information about a project that's happening in the UK, and just break down a little bit of the barriers that can happen between parents, families. And we might also have other people joining in who are carers or researchers or clinicians themselves, but having that kind of link and being able to ask any question. And with that in mind, any question is allowed. There's no wrong questions, only the ones not asked. Because we don't know how many people are going to join as we go along, it might be helpful popping questions in the chat. But if we don't have loads of people, then feel free to raise your hand as we go along. Possibly the chat option may be better, because actually if we don't have time to go through all the questions, it'll let us collate the questions and hopefully kind of put it into some Word document and quiz Katerina for the answers so that we can put that on the website and answer everyone's question. So without further ado, the most important person here tonight, obviously everyone I think on here probably is aware of her, is Dr. Katerina Vezyroglou. So thank you for coming. I know that you're obviously trained pediatric neurologist, trained in Germany, and you've been with us in the UK for around 6 years at Great Ormond Street. But I think it'd be helpful if anyone's on here who hasn't met you in person, that maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your academic background, the experience you've had with AHC, people with AHC, and why you're interested in studying AHC, which is obviously important for all of us here.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine, for the welcome and introduction. And it's really nice to be here, and thanks for everybody who joined in. I think most of the people joining in today have already met me, but for those who haven't, I'm Katerina. I'm working with Professor Helen Cross at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Started working there, yes, almost 6 years ago now, doing the epilepsy fellowship, and this is how I met Professor Cross, and then I continued working there, and during the last years I've also been working with her in her special interest ambulance for patients with AHC, which was where I mostly got in contact with this condition for the first time, and I guess also realized that there is so much that we don't know about the condition, and I guess that's behind my interest in actually doing clinical research into it, trying to understand a little bit more, trying to get a few more answers for all the questions that families ask me in clinic that I don't have the answers for at the moment, I guess.
Thank you very much. So your study is called the AHC and ATP1A3 diseases natural history study, and I know that you've done a really helpful infographic, which quite a few people have said has been very helpful. So I wondered if you could maybe start for everyone here. Obviously quite a few are probably already involved, but we've all got different questions even if we're involved in it. Maybe just talking us through the study and perhaps, you know, sharing that infographic, and we could talk through it and ask questions as we go perhaps.
Yeah, I will try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I've never done this before on Zoom. Strange. In 2020, I should have done it before. But yeah, I can't see what you see. Okay, perfect. So I just did this little infographic to try and explain a little bit about the clinical research that we're doing at the moment in the UK. I don't think that I need to tell anybody here what AHC is, so I will just skip over that. And I already mentioned that there are very many unanswered questions about the condition, but I think that's also something that everybody here knows. So I'll just skip to our study that we're trying to do into AHC and also in other conditions that are maybe related to it in the sense that they are caused by mutations in the gene that's also causing a great majority of the AHC of AHC in patients with a condition, even though we do know that there are also very many that do not have a mutation ATP1A3. So this is a study that is taking place in the whole of the UK as well as Ireland. And it is for children, but it's also for young people and adults. So it's for anybody who lives in the UK or Ireland and has either a clinical diagnosis of AHC or a mutation in the ATP1A3 gene, either with also having an AHC condition or a different condition, or maybe a very mild condition. We don't really know how wide the spectrum is of patients with mutations in this gene. So we're interested in hearing from all of these people. And what we are then interested to do is to collect as much information as we can about the clinical history of the patients. We are interested in the episodes that patients are having, and one way to further look at these and maybe try to understand them a bit better is to look at videos of them. So we are interested in collecting videos of episodes in the patients. We are interested in examining the patients, and we are also interested in investigations like MRIs and EEGs that they might have done during their like being clinically treated in other hospitals or in our hospital, and we're interested in looking into these investigations in more detail. And because AHC is such a very rare disease, and even if you look in the whole of the UK, you might researchers around the globe really, and to contribute into international studies. So there is one big natural history study that is going on that is being led by Professor Mikati in the US, and they collect data on the clinical histories of patients with alternating hemiplegia. So for patients who take part in our study and who are happy for us to do that, we would feed in the information that we take of their clinical history into this study in order to make their cohort bigger. Because with clinical research, especially in rare diseases, the more patients you have information from, the more meaningful results you will get in the end. So the objective really is to collect as big cohorts as possible, and international studies and collaborations are good for that. And the other part of the study that might become part of an international, of a bigger cohort study is the Eeg data, because colleagues that are actually based in London, Professor Sisodiya and Dr. Balestrini, which some of you might know, are interested in looking at EEGs, not just from our patients here, but also from other patients around the globe. And they're setting up a protocol to collect EEG data from patients with AHC and look at that. So if patients that are taking part in our study are also interested in their data contributing in these studies, the we can do that.
Thank you, Katerina. So can I just ask, it's obviously called a natural history study, and that's kind of a term that maybe isn't as familiar as, say, research that's done in a lab or, you know, on a human as such. But what you're saying, and when you mention the cohorts, you're talking about just observing what's already been collected. So I think one or two parents have asked, you know, does my child need to go through any extra painful tests? How are you going to get hold of this information? But what you're describing is that information's already there, and you're going to tap into it and pull it together. And the way your study feeds into the OBSERV AHC, I think, was sometimes a bit of a confusion for some, including myself, at an earlier point, and that is you're collecting similar data.
Yes.
But you're actually collecting a little bit different as well. Is that right? You're collecting a few more things, but some of it's feeding into that international study as well, if the parents or the person with AHC agrees.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, I think the OBSERV AHC study is collecting the clinical history of the patients, which means like, when did your episode start? How old were you? What kind of episodes did you have? What medication did you take? Did it help? Did it not help? What happened later? Kind of this journey of every patient. And all observational, like clinical studies like this, are interested in the same thing. So the questions that OBSERV AHC is asking about clinical history are exactly the same questions that we are asking about clinical history. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, really. We all want to know, when did it start? What are the symptoms? What medications have helped? What medications haven't helped? So actually, the questionnaire that we have and the questionnaire that OBSERV AHC has is more or less the same. So when I do that interview, I can put it all into there. They have this database that you can access through the internet, and then you can just fill in this information. So, and the other thing that they have set up, which is actually quite elegant, is an event. I'm missing a word now.
The event diary.
Yes, an event diary that you can access on the computer or on your phone as a parent. So this is actually quite nice. So if parents are interested in contributing to the OBSERV AHC study, they can also be set up to have access to this online event diary, and then they can use it to log events, which is helpful for natural history studies, because it's kind of like an immediate feedback of how things change over time, and maybe also if there are medication changes that are being done. It's a tool to see whether, at least as far as the episodes are concerned, they have made a difference to the better or for the worse.
Yeah, so I got a bit confused with that earlier on, and that the thing that we can send to you is obviously the videos that you've mentioned in your infographic, but we can also do that separate event diary through to OBSERV AHC as well. So there's those two bits that families can do. But otherwise, you know, some parents have said, do they need to come to London? And what you're saying is no, or do they need that clinical examination part? Do you need to do all bits that you've got on the infographic there?
No, no, we are very aware that it's difficult for families, depending on where they live, to travel to London. And I mean, this year, it's a no anyway. We wouldn't ask anybody to travel for research purposes. But even in normal times, if families are interested to come to London, we are interested in doing a clinical examination with the patient. But if it's difficult, there's no reason to, there's no obligation to do that. It's already incredibly helpful to just collect the clinical history, which can be done either through a video call or through a phone call, to collect the previous MRI and EEG data, which we can contact the local hospitals where they have been done for, if the parents tell us where that is and give us permission to do that. So very many things actually the majority of the information that we are interested in collecting, the families do not have to come to London for.
I think that's really helpful. And just to kind of recap, it is children, adults, there's no age limit. You would like anyone who wants to join in.
Yes.
Yeah. And they don't have to go through their doctor now. They can go and approach you directly. Is that right?
Yes. The way the ethics were set up was that the local neurologist or pediatrician would refer the patients to the study, but that has proven difficult. And I think this year, maybe because of, I don't know, work pressures, and then this year has been particularly difficult for physicians working in the NHS. So our experience is that that doesn't always happen easily. So now we've done an amendment to the ethics that allows the patients to refer themselves. So any patient who's interested to participate in the study can just give me an email and say, hi, I would like to know more, and maybe I would like to participate.
That's great.
And of course, there is no obligation to participate. So if someone is curious about the study and wants to know more about it, or wants to know how much do I have to contribute, or could I do just that? Or I'm very happy to answer any questions. And if at the end of it, they decide not to take part, that's absolutely fine. And similarly, if people sign up for the study and then 3 months later think, well, actually, I don't want to do this anymore, you can also withdraw from a study at any time. It's a completely voluntary thing, and it's no commitment.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Thank you. And I know you'd mentioned if there's any researchers or clinicians that see this later on and want to find out, you'd be happy to answer questions.
Yes, of course.
So I know that one question that's come up a lot from parents that they've mentioned, and it's probably the one on the tip of our tongues, is the $1 million question. We all want that magic drug to help our child, to improve our loved ones' quality of life and living. How do you see your study helping that? How are we going to, is it completely opposite? It's not looking at testing a drug, it's not going to give out that answer, or is it going to help in other ways to get us there?
Well, it's not a study that's looking to develop a drug for AHC, and obviously this is a very important aspect of AHC research, and it would be amazing if we could find a medication that helps the children get significantly better, because unfortunately, as everybody here knows very well, we do have some medications that we try in AHC and some with some effect, but we don't really have a medication that makes a miraculous difference in the children's life, and we would all love to have that. So this study is what we call an observational study. As you said before, it's looking at the information that's already there, so it's not developing a new drug. I think that it still contributes to that effort in two ways, if you want. The one is that one problem we have with rare conditions is that we have a few patients in different places being seen by physicians who might only see one of them, and then all of us kind of like try some things, and there's very little information for the whole community of what has worked, what experiences do we all have. And I think it's really important to try and bring this all together and get a better idea of what medications actually do for our patients, which ones help better, which ones help less well, etc. I think that's in itself might help us within the limited means that we have at the moment to at least use them in the most effective way, if that makes sense. And even though that's not a huge thing and it's not a cure in that sense, I do think that it might make a difference rather than losing time trying things that have been tried by others and have not worked. The other way I think that it might help is that, ideally, we will get a treatment that will help every patient and make them completely well, and then you don't really need much to prove that this treatment works, because it's a complete cure, but it might be that treatments are developed and are being put out there that might help patients a little bit or a significant bit, but maybe not cure them completely or not help every patient. So I think it's important to have information on how a condition normally progresses in order to be able to say whether new drugs work or don't work. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously earlier in my journey with AHC with my daughters, and many already linking in here, but I think there's probably a shared feeling that sometimes even with the best physicians in the world, best doctors in the world, you do sometimes feel like your child's a guinea pig and you have to keep trying different drugs and potentially getting the side effects of it. So I suppose what you're saying is you might be able to potentially pull out some of the drugs that you might start with first. Obviously flunarizine seems common and some other ones are common, but they don't work for everyone. So you might be able to pull out one or two drugs that we start in a certain order, rather than, you know, like what we find is there is a massive variation in what people use. And, you know, that's often a chat on the family forum, all the different drugs that are on there. I had a question following on from what you were saying, you know, like the different groups, I mean, and a potential in the future that your study maybe might highlight, you know, I don't know, like if people have certain symptoms, they might be more likely to respond to a drug if it does come along, and if it is a new drug, and you might be able to look at certain groups within your big group that might fit that drug more without the side effects potentially. Is that, you know, an option by collecting this information on a big group for the future?
Yes, I think it's only as it gets better the bigger the group gets. I think the more patients you look at, the more you can then get information like that. Because if you have one patient or two patients or three patients, and maybe they're very different, because we know that our patients are quite variable in the way they present, then it's more difficult to do that. But if you, and I think that's also why it's important to collaborate with research in other countries. If you get bigger cohorts and then you can look at information from many patients, then you might be able to do that and say that actually this has worked very well, and oh, it has worked very well in these 30 patients, and oh, look, these 30 patients have this thing in common. I think that's also why it's interesting to look in more detail at EEG and MRI to kind of see whether you can see changes there that might tip you off. Might be that nothing comes of it, but you could imagine that maybe you can see some subtle things there that might tip you off that this patient might be doing this way in the future, or this medication might work for them. But this is all if we manage to get a big cohort and look at all these things.
So number wise, I don't know if you're able to say how many you've got joined up already and how many you would ideally, in an ideal world, love to have to kind of helpfully try and get meaningful results. I'm not sure if you're able to kind of tell us roughly how many you've got, both children and adults, and, you know, the overall group.
At the moment, I have. I mean, it's not that bad actually. I 15 children have signed up. Only 2 adults, but I think it might well be because people don't know that the study is open for adults. And I mean, I think even if 50 people signed up, I would think that's amazing for such a rare condition. But of course, ideally, you would want everybody in the UK to sign up.
Yeah, and obviously we don't even know exactly how many people fit into that, you know, the group that you want to reach, which is one big question, isn't it, in terms of actually looking at resources and having maybe you know, information on actually how many people in the UK have it would be, and Ireland have it, would be helpful. I realise we're coming to near the end of time, and it's been very helpful. I wondered if anyone was kind of holding back and actually wanted to type a question or raise their hand. You know, some of the questions I've been going through have been from, you know, collated from different parents as well, but you know, just stick your hand up now if you have something, or tap it into the chat, and we'll kind of catch up with that as we're nearing the end. I just wanted to ask you about what you were saying with the EEGs and the MRIs. You know, obviously there has been some research recently looking at MRIs, and particularly the area at the back of the brain, the cerebellum, the bit that kind of controls some of the motor and other movement stuff, as well as loads of other things it does. And so is there something that you think you might be interested to find based on that that recent research looking at the volume of the back of the brain, and maybe there's a clue there?
Yes, I think because with AHC we have some symptoms that, like, one symptom we have is dystonia. One symptom that some patients have is what we call ataxia, like being a bit unsteady on your feet. And these sometimes are linked to different regions of the brain. Like as you said, there's one region at the back of the brain we call the cerebellum. You can look at an MRI and think that, well, actually it's looking normal. And then maybe if you look a little bit more closely, more in a research setting rather than a clinical setting, and you might measure volumes of different parts of the brain that you think are connected to different symptoms, and then might see, well, actually, yes, it is a little bit smaller. I think that's the kind of studies you were referring to. And it would be interesting to see whether this is something that holds up in different cohorts, because it has been looked at like in small cohorts in other countries. And also whether it tells us something about our patients, like, is the patient that has a smaller cerebellum the one who has the ataxia or not? So, like, can I use the MRI to tell me what my patient looks like, or is it something that I might see and then later on my patient will develop something? And I mean, ideally, if I give a medication later on, does that not happen to the MRI and or to my patient?
That's really helpful. So like a marker, what
Yes.
some people might call a biological marker or a biomarker, that might actually say that person's more likely to get certain symptoms. The ataxia mentioned that off balance on their legs, and but some might not, and some might actually then benefit from a certain drug more. So what you're saying is gathering that information might help us just kind of put that, I think you put in the infographic, that piece of the jigsaw that we need to know for AHC. And similarly, I've got a couple of questions coming in, so that's great. I'm going to quiz you about them in 2 minutes, but the EEGs, you're going to be taking EEGs that are normal as well. You're interested in the ones that haven't been in an episode and ones that have been in an episode. Is there anything particular that you want to look at the difference between them before I quiz you on a couple of questions from the chat?
One thing that has been looked at I mean, obviously in epilepsy, we look a lot at seizures in the EEG, but there's also quite a bit of research that has been done on EEG in sleep and EEG in sleep in children. How does it relate to their development? Things like that. And it would be interesting to look at these things also in patients with AHC, and maybe also in correlation to their development and how they do. But there's no way of knowing whether we will find anything interesting there. It might be because it hasn't been looked at. So it might be that we don't find anything. I don't want to to be saying that, yes, this is going to give us answers, but it might be interesting to look, for example, at EEG whilst our patients are sleeping. And of course, it's interesting to look at the EEG during the different episodes, even the ones that we know that are not seizures, to see whether there's anything going on in the brain that we can see on the EEG during them.
That would be really helpful information, really, especially sleep. I'm sure is something that affects a lot of us and is very important, and understanding why that might be different on an EEG between different situations. I have a couple of questions, and I realized that we started kind of 2 minutes late, and we promised 8:30, and so we're going to just finish these questions because we started a little bit late. So Jocelyn, welcome. I assume you're in Canada, and she's asking, are you accepting patients from Canada? And I suppose the second bit to that, if not, do you know where Jocelyn and family might be able to go to join in?
We don't, because we only have ethics for patients from the UK, but I'm not sure about the OBSERVE AHC study. I could pin them an email and ask about whether they have a center in Canada.
That would be great. So we can find that out and add that to some summary of questions. Lindsay's got a question. Is there a particular age when an MRI becomes more useful? No, it takes some time for babies' brains to develop. Really good question there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, because we don't traditionally, the books say that the MRI in AHC is normal. And then we have some patients where it can be slightly abnormal or more abnormal. And I don't think that big enough groups of patients have been looked at in order to be able to answer the question, like specifically for AHC, is there an age where we start seeing abnormalities in the MRI? It is true that because babies' brains, not even babies, humans' brains mature after they are born. So pregnancy lasts 9 months and then you're still not ready. The brain goes through this process that we call myelination. And this is only completed after the first 2 years of life. So usually in epilepsy, we might say, if you have had an MRI when you were very little, it might make sense to look at it again after you are 2 years old. For AHC, we don't say that because at this point, we don't have any evidence that we will see something in the MRI that is clinically relevant for our patient and will change the way we treat them. And because for children, MRIs mean general anesthetic, we wouldn't ask families to go through them just for research. But if for other reasons MRIs are done, we are interested to look at them.
That's great. And I've heard myelination that you mentioned described before as the kind of insulation around the nerve to help that kind of nerve connection move faster. That's what you're referring it to. Yeah. Okay, great. So Amelia, welcome. Her son has recently been diagnosed. So welcome to the AHC family. Unfortunately, we see you in this context, but hopefully you get a lot of support. There's lots of people who've lived a long time with different different hurdles, so hopefully reaching out to everyone, you'll get that support. Her son is 6, recently diagnosed. He's had 2 MRIs. Would they be helpful? And she'd love to join the study. I don't know, Amelia, if you're in the UK, but if you are, I'm assuming so. How would she go about joining with her son?
Yes, I mean, obviously he's eligible and we would very much like to have him in the study. Should I just pop my email into the chat? And
that'd be lovely.
Amelia and anybody else who's interested or has questions could just send me an email there, and then we can take it from there.
Lovely. And if anyone has joined in and new to AHC, I know I've found a great support from the family support groups on the Facebook. There's the AHC UK one, there's the private one, as well as the public page, and there's also the international one. So if you're not involved with that, do link up and ask to sign it. So a good support network there. So I don't see anyone else's hands up. don't see any more questions. I think I've been through most of them that have come through in advance. Anything from you, Katerina, that you would like to know from the family before we finish, and anyone else joining in who's linked with AHC?
I think the only thing that I would be very interested is if parents feel that there's something about the study that is making it very difficult to take part, that maybe I haven't realized. I would love to know about that. So anything that families feel like is not well set up, or is not a good idea, or it would be better to do it in a different way, would be very happy to get that feedback.
Lovely, thank you. So just to recap, anyone in the UK and the Republic of Ireland can join in your particular study. They don't need to go through their doctor, they can contact you directly, and I know your details are at the bottom of that infographic, and we'll make sure that's on our website as well. That it is all ages, anyone is welcome, but both children and adults can get in touch with you as the first point of call, and that you're looking for anyone with AHC. So that's someone who's got the ATP1A3 gene, as well as those that don't, because you might actually get information for them to help them. I know they sometimes feel quite a neglected group in this, but they are just as important. And anyone with any ATP1A3 diseases, all that group can email away to you, or and you can have a chat, and there's no you know, you don't have to sign up, you can just ask the questions first.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Great summary.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining on. I know that we're a few minutes late, and we would be very keen for feedback, perhaps maybe some more sessions like this in the future, chatting with you, Katerina, and some of the other researchers that are doing different things, perhaps maybe even chatting around some clinical parts of AHC, some questions that people might, you know, some of the terminology and things that might be difficult, or some of the symptoms that people might want to kind of ask general things. So it would be great to get feedback. You can drop us an email on, I'll just check it, support@ahcuk.org, and just, you know, good and bad things. Obviously, if you felt it wasn't what you had hoped it would be, that would be good to know as well. But thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a good rest of the evening, and thank you very much, Katerina, for joining us.
No, thank you, Catherine, and everybody who joined in.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.